how to be more interesting. How can you become more interesting to talk to listen to on stage, to talk to on a network event? How can you become that person? And people actually say this. How can you become that person when they have talked to you at work, at a network event, that they close off and say, I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you. You entertained me. It was interesting. I learned so much. I really got a good vibe. And even if you're not in the room, how can you make sure that people say to your colleague, to your friend, to your family, I met your colleague. I loved in talking to him. I really enjoyed the conversation. That they even say that when you're not there. Well, the good news is it's not a gift, it's a choice. You can actually, it might sound weird, but you can actually learn, requires a bit of a mindset switch, which we're going to talk about in this video, but you can actually learn to become more interesting to talk to. It's not entirely correct, the term, I know, but it sounds cool. We can actually bump up your interest rate or your interesting rate.
Are you listening? Damn.
The first thing you want to do if you want to become a more interesting person to talk to is live an interesting life. Live an interesting life and an interested life. We're going to come back to that later, but first let's live an interesting life. And with an interesting life, I mean experience things, travel, read books, do training, go to conferences. People you look up to and you're like, wow, they have so much to share and it's so fun to talk to them and I can listen for them for hours. It's not that they sit in their chair or just behind their desk all day or in their sofa and just like, I'm feeling interesting. I'm feeling interest coming up. Yeah, I'm having a great idea. That's not how it works. People that you love to listen to and have all these different experiences, data, anecdotes, whatever it is that they're sharing, they can talk about that and they can relate to you and have a conversation and give you insight in certain things because they lived it, they experienced it. They are constantly on the move to do certain things. And it doesn't always have to be with things that you are necessarily already interested in. Like, for example, I could do everything that has to do with communication, but I just recently did a training on pottery. Making pottery. I never made a pot before with the clay. Is this going to help my business? Not necessarily, but it was a great experience. I learned so much. I stepped into a community, a world of pottery that I never knew. But now I can take these things along and maybe someday I'm making a talk or I'm talking to someone who actually does this for a living or is also in pottery. I can share things. I can relate. I can talk. I can share the experience I had, even though I was a very big amateur with the pot. Gather those experiences, not just for yourself, because you will grow as a human being, no matter if you use it for your communication or not, but live an interesting life first. If you live an interesting life, your body will also show it when you're communicating, if you're talking about the experiences, because you lived it. You were there. It triggered a certain emotion. Your communication partner will feel it. And together with the insight and the energy that it brings because you lived it, that will make for a very interesting story, a very interesting conversation, and a more easy way for you to relate. Second thing I said is not just live an interesting life to gather up those experiences, but also live an interested life, live a curious life. And you're already curious if you're out there exploring, doing things, which we just talked about, but do it with a different mindset. I will say do it with a mindset of a storyteller. Simple example. You're living an interesting life, so you decide, I'm gonna read certain books. Maybe a novel, business book at a certain time. You love reading, you go there, you learn some stuff. But don't read the book just to read the book. Read that book with an interested, curious mindset, the mindset of a storyteller, of someone that not only reads the book to read the book, but reads it in what can I use of this book in my future conversations, in my future presentations. So if I read a book, I read that book, and every time, doesn't matter what it's about, it could be about pottery, it could be about pottery, it doesn't have to be about communication. And if I'm reading that book, at a certain point, I will come across data, I will come across certain anecdotes, certain things that I think are interesting, that trigger me, and I'm like, how can I use this in my own line of work? How can I use this in my next presentation? How can I use this when I'm talking to my clients? It could be that I could relate this thing to my business. To give you a very concrete example, I recently read a book about dopamine. It has nothing to do with my business. It's about the hormones and the different chemicals going around in your brain and how your brain works. But there was so much in there that I thought I can relate these things from dopamine to my own business. This is super interesting. I never knew this. This is the science behind how the brain works and what dopamine does, and how I see dopamine coming back in sales talks and marketing and convincing people to do stuff. There you go. I just read that book with an interested mindset, a curious mindset of a storyteller, not just reading it, but thinking this is something I can use. And I put it in my backpack, even write it down. And this is how I approach everything, and how a lot of storytellers, professional speakers, salespeople, marketers approach things. They live an interesting life, but they also ask themselves, what can I do with this? How can I remember this? How can I link this to my own situation, my own business? And how can I put it in my backpack, maybe to use it later on? Same with travel. I know you get the point. Just to give you some examples. And it might sound extreme, like, Marnik, do I have to live like that all the time? No, you don't. But after a while, it will be like riding a bike. You will have these sensors up, and it will go automatically. You think like, ooh, this I can use. This could be very interesting. I can do something with this. This I should remember. Went to Portugal, on the beach, enjoying time with my lovely wife. Sitting there at the beach, Portuguese sun, and there was a person working with the chairs and the beds on the beach, and I talked to him, and he was a very entertaining person. He was living the dream. He loved putting the beds on the beach. He has been doing it for years. He was probably one of the happiest men I met in my life, and I talked to him, and that whole conversation, I thought to myself, well, good for you. You're a great guy. But also that conversation, what he said to me, I later on used in my leadership trainings. Because I thought, this I can use. The mindset of this person, the way he approaches his business of putting the beds and the chairs and the how do you say that, umbrellas on the beach, I can use this. So live an interesting life, experience things, get that body moving in the world, and live an interested life, a curious life. The third one is journal. Meaning journal, it doesn't have to be physically writing it down, but find a way to remember all these things that you're experiencing and that you think is interesting and that you can use. And there's two reasons for that. If you write it down, or in some way type it down, or do the voice record, whatever you want to do, if you're remembering it, the first thing that it does, it helps you remember. It helps you to really process and tell your brain, I want to remember this. This is important. And as you're writing it down, your brain is already making the connections on how you can use this further on down the line in your business, in your talks, in your conversations. But also, if you regularly journal and write it down again and rewrite it and connect it with other stuff, just do a couple of minutes a day or a couple of minutes a week, your body is processing this information. And you're not just writing it down because you want to remember it. You're already adapting it to you, who you are, how you want to use it. And then when it comes out at a network event or in your presentation, you will see that it will become your story. It will become something that you have lived, that you have thought about, and actually perfected throughout your journaling. And you also remember it because you wrote it down. The simplest example I can give of what the effect is I used to do stand-up comedy, and comedians, they only do that, what I'm just talking about. They write down what they experienced, maybe in a bar, talking to a friend, what they saw on the news, and they try to make a joke out of it. But that first joke, most of the time, is crap. It's not funny, and that's why they go to open mics and they try their jokes. That's what I also mean by journaling. They remember it because they write it down, but also because they rewrite it, write another joke that might be linked to it. They test it on stage, which you can also do, of course, but they test it on stage. And as they work with it, that initial joke experience becomes something that's actually funny, that works for them, that they can use in different situations. Maybe they're interviewed on TV, they use it in their show. That's the same mindset you also have to do with the journaling as, in general, a person, a communicator. Rework it, and the next time you tell it to a colleague or a friend, they will be like, wow, that's super cool, super interesting. Yes, because it has been brewing for a time now on your computer, in your little notebook, and you also lived it, of course, because you're living an interesting life. Which also links to a second point with that, is just like the comedians, practice it. Let's say you wrote something down, you learned something. Let's say I learned something about the dopamine book I read, and I wrote it down, and I like, this I need to remember. And I wrote some other stuff down, and my brain is always start working. How can I link that to my business? That would be cool. I can use the dopamine. Pop, 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 pop. It's subconsciously, it goes there on the train, in the car. And at a certain point, I'm talking to someone, and this is not, I am not making this up. I was at a banking client of mine, and I was talking to a certain gentleman before I went on stage, and I inserted the part, because it was a natural link, inserted the part about the dopamine and connected to my business and all the things I've been writing down. And you should have seen the reaction. That one person even asked, like, what book did you get this from? Because this I have to read. They listened, they learned something. You could see the spark in their eyes, like, this is super interesting. I never knew this. And I was telling it, but I was not just citing the book. I was telling it in a way that it also linked to what I'm doing with communication and things like that. They wanted to read the book. They loved talking about it. They even asked me after the talk, like, what was that thing with the dopamine again? And that taught me this works. I tried it. Just like the comedian on the open mic, I threw it out there and I saw this resonates with people. And think about it afterwards, after a conversation, what resonated with a certain person and what didn't. Why didn't it? Maybe you should leave it out, or maybe you should rework it, or it worked and you can keep it for later on. And you stack it up as, this is an element, this is a part that is something interesting I can use in the future. And this, I know we're getting at a creepy level, because you might be thinking, I'm not saying you do, but you might be thinking, Martin, is this how you go through life? If you want to be a better communicator, if you want to be a storyteller, if you want to be an interesting person on stage, this is the mindset you need to have. So you try it. You try it again. You rework it. You try it. And after a while, if you sometimes look at people on YouTube or on stage at conferences and you're like, wow, what a great speaker. What a great communicator. Look at that person. 5 people around him at his table and everybody's just eating out of their hand. If you want that, those people are not making it up on the spot. Those people are sharing the stories they have lived in their interesting life. They have noted and thought about by being curious and interested, journaled it, reworked it, tried it, many conversations before. And if you like it so much, you're probably getting the best version of that insight, because they tested it and they pushed out all the clutter. And now you're getting the best version of that story. So try it. Throw it out there. And sometimes it doesn't work. People forget anyway. They're not going to pay attention. They forget. Rework it. And the moment it starts working, do it many times. Just like a comedian. The joke you hear at a show that is in a Netflix special is a joke that has been told maybe 100 times before the show. Perfected it. Go through life like that, and you will have, at the end of your life, have so many great anecdotes, so many great insights, things you experienced, perfected, that people are like, please talk for the rest of the day. And then the last one is, now it might sound that it's all about you. The interesting life, being curious, journaling, perfecting the things that you're talking, testing it, seeing how it links to your business. An interesting person to talk to is not a person that does a monologue. It's not a person that talks about themselves all the time and always wants to lead in the conversation and wants to have the highest word. No, an interesting person is someone that did all the things I just told you and knows that in the end, what people are interested in is, and it might sound harsh, but it's in a positive way, people are interested in themselves, their own situation, their own lives. And in a good conversation, good communication, good talk, it's not about you. It's about the people you're talking to. It's about the audience. One person, 1,000, doesn't matter. And people that know how to grasp someone's attention and really have a good conversation, good talk, they know that whatever they're talking about, dopamine, pottery, communication, cars, no matter what it is, they will listen even more if it's applied to them. So if I'm, let's say an easy one. If I'm talking about communication, my business, I could talk about communication to an IT professional. But that IT professional could be that they're interested in what I'm saying, but it could also be that in their mind, or maybe literally in their reaction, it'd be like, super interesting what you're doing, but You know, I don't stand that much on stage. I don't go that much to networking events. I'm in IT. Most of the time we spend behind a computer. We're coding. We're doing security. Yes, we talk to each other, of course, but that whole I'm in the open, that's not something I need for my job, which is fair. But if I then talk about communication and I know that person is in IT, I relate the things that I say about communication on how it benefited certain clients that are in IT, how it helped them get better projects, how it helped them to convince people to pick better passwords and take security and GDPR more to heart. And then it becomes interesting because then that person knows it's about communication, it's about what you're experiencing, what you're teaching, your insights, but it's about me. I can use this. This is cool. How did you do that? That's exactly what I'm bumping into. Tell me more. The moment they get the feeling that the information is about them, the more interested they will be. So that's a really important one. Don't talk about yourself. Yes, you share the information, but talk about the other person. Get them involved, ask them questions, and make sure that everything you say gives them the feeling, this is for me. This is something I need to hear. This is something I can use. This is something that touches upon me. And if you do that, I guarantee you will become way more interesting to talk to. And people will actually, I always say to my clients, if you're on stage, for example, if people don't take pictures and people are not on their phone and you have, it's extreme what I'm saying, and you don't have anything going on social media about your talk, it's either a really bad talk and it wasn't interesting, or it was a super good talk and people were just like little children so mesmerized by what you're saying that they completely forgot to do something with their phone, take pictures, post something. And I guarantee you people will be hanging on your lips. And it's not that you're like, hi, I'm Marnik, look at me. That's not what it's about. It's about people leaving and saying, I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed this. I got so much from it. Thank you. Let's talk again soon. I love to connect. That's what you want. And to end it, I know maybe a longer video, but I'm really passionate about this. To end it, you want the same thing as, and that's why I always admire him, as my grandfather who recently passed away. My grandfather was a person who he was very, very modest. So again, this has nothing to do with look at me, I'm boasting. Could walk into a room, talk to people he have never met before, and they would just like he's telling a fairy tale, and people are like, grown people 40, 50 years old are listening like a little kid and be like, wow. And he could talk about everything. He wasn't an expert in everything, but he experienced so much that he could talk about pottery. He could talk about dopamine, communication, cars, motorcycle. He knew something about everything and he could make that conversation about them so it was really a natural flow. And as a grandkid, I heard this sentence so much. What I said in the beginning of the video, they always came to me and said, I met your grandfather last week at an event or a gathering from the neighbors, whatever. That's such an interesting man. Wow, so much wisdom. You're so lucky with your grandfather. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for you in your communication, in your presentations, to become that person. And you will enjoy it so much because it gives you so much back. You see that energy, that emotion coming back, and people love talking to you and you love talking to people. And there's nothing more beautiful because we are made to communicate. That is what makes us human. So I hope it helps. If so, subscribe, like the video, you know what to do. Get that interesting rate up for yourself. Use these techniques, go out there, take the storytelling mindset with you and start exploring. I wish you an interesting life. Bye-bye.
Are you listening? Damn.